A father punished his 3-year-old daughter because she wasted some golden wrapping paper. She was trying to wrap a box and decorate it and stick it under the tree. And so, as kids do, not being able to utilize, well, some adults either, that wrapping paper to, its most efficiency, she wasted a lot. Money was tight. Dad was already stressed. And so he punished her. The next day, she came and gave that 3-year-old childlike wrapping box to her father. And she said, "Daddy, this is for you." He looked at the box and his eyes filled with tears. And he immediately felt remorseful for what he had done and how he had reacted the day before. But then when he opened up the box, he became infuriated. And he looked at his daughter and he said, "Don't you know that when you give someone a present, that there must be something inside the box?" She looked up at her father with tears in her eyes. And she says, "But Daddy, I filled the box with kisses. I blew kisses into the box, and it's for you, Daddy." Immediately the man just, again, felt remorseful. Tears come down his eyes, and he hugs his daughter, and he asks for forgiveness. In a real way, each of us have been given a golden box filled with kisses. Unconditional love. Could have been from a child, could have been from a friend, from a loved one, a family member, just someone who stood by your side when things went tough and rough and when you made the wrong decisions. Someone who was still there with you. Each of us have experienced that. I bet you many of us experienced that from a school teacher. But each of us in a real way have these golden boxes that are filled with unconditional love. It is the most precious thing that any of us can acquire or give. I have some things that I want to say today. I wrote down about unconditional love. And I realized that there is a massive debate. You may not realize this, but there is a massive debate about whether or not unconditional love is a real thing. Whether it's even possible to give love unconditionally. Look it up. Read the blogs, the psychology papers. There's debates on both sides as to whether or not love is actually unconditional and can be unconditional. Whether it's a real thing or not. Well, I believe that it is. And as I read through various things that people have said about unconditional love and the arguments to why it exists and why it doesn't exist, the biggest thing that I took away from that is that oftentimes we confuse relationships with love. We confuse things with love. And as a result, we feel like love cannot be unconditional. But like so many times, we really need to redefine what we mean when we say love. See, because love, unconditional love, is the purest form of love. And it is the most precious thing that we can acquire and the most precious thing that we can give. So what do we mean by unconditional love? What it is and what it isn't. I have a few things I have written down for you this morning. Unconditional love. It's caring about another person without any thought for what we might get out of it. It's accepting someone for who they are, their faults and weaknesses. It's loving someone under any circumstance. It's a love that is not contingent on the right circumstances or feelings. It's actually a love that rises above one's circumstances and one's feelings. Yes, it's a love that fights against everything that you feel and think and want to do in the moment, and it rises above that. Unconditional love is selfless. It's not the love we receive from others when we have done what they want us to do, or we haven't gotten in their way, or what they demand of us. It's the love that we receive when we make mistakes, or do not do what others demand or want us to do. It's the love we receive when we make poor choices. That love, in spite of the decisions we make, it's unconditional love. And it's unconditional love that keeps people fighting for us right by our side. And it's unconditional love that gives them in that moment the power to heal, to guide, and yes, even correct us. When you know someone is on your side, when you know someone has your best interest at heart, that's unconditional love. It doesn't mean you like or agree with everything someone does. It doesn't mean you endorse their decisions. It doesn't mean that you passively stand by while someone destroys their life. Because to love is to desire the best for them. And love demands action. It is the driving force that spurs you to do whatever it is that needs to be done in order to help someone. It doesn't mean changes don't need to be made. It's not contingent, though, on those changes being made. It's loving regardless if the changes happen or not. It's being able to see the very worst in someone and still see them as worthy of your compassion, of your mercy, of your help. Think about that. It's being able to see the very worst in someone and still yet see how they are worthy of your love, your compassion. It is the part of us that is able to forgive the unforgivable, whatever that is in your mind. It is what leads us to being able to forgive. It's being able to go beyond the outward flaws or whatever we perceive as flaws of other people. It doesn't mean that you won't feel negative emotions. It doesn't mean you won't be angry and get frustrated and hurt by others and have arguments, etc., etc. But these things don't diminish the love that you have, the love that comes unconditionally. Now, just because love is unconditional, it doesn't mean the relationship has to be. This is where we get things confused, I believe. Just because love is unconditional, it doesn't mean the relationship has to be. It doesn't mean that boundaries don't exist. It doesn't mean that you have to just accept abuse, neglect, or toxic relationships. It's possible to still want the best for other people, which is love, and still see the good in them, even if they're toxic people, even if they are abusive, even if they are neglectful. As difficult as that might seem to be, and it is still possible. Unconditional love doesn't mean that I have to get caught up in a situation that is self-destructive. Unconditional love doesn't mean that there are no consequences. And as a result, unconditional love is hard. It's a very difficult thing to rise above the feelings and the emotions and the things that we believe in that moment. It's a very difficult thing, partly because we are programmed for conditional love. From very early on, I see it in my own children. And yes, part of that is a result of how I've responded to things, and part of it just seems to be intuitive. My kids want my love, and so therefore they thought they had to do things that would make me proud of them. And I would have to literally say things. Listen, there's nothing you can do that make me less or more proud of you. I love you regardless, no matter what. Now, I realize you might define those words differently and use different phrases, etc., but that's what I felt like I had to do, because it seemed to me like it was a very natural, intuitive thing within some of my kids to feel that way. And part of that might have had to do with me. I don't know. There are lots of factors involved in this, but recognizing it is important. But we are conditioned for, or programmed for, conditional love. Love that is earned from a good behavior. We think that if we say the right things or do the right things or look a certain way, then they will love us. It's all over our culture. It's in our literature. It's in our songs. It's in our commercials. It's in everything. It's the way we're programmed. It's how we see things. And we seem to be content. We seem to be content with this. We seem to be okay with this, but that's not love. That's not love. My guess is that we have a hard time, and I know this from experience, we have a hard time seeing and recognizing unconditional love when it has been shown. Maybe the thought of loving someone unconditionally is hard to swallow, because it is a hard thing. It's not easy. It makes you vulnerable. It opens you up, and it's hard. You have to rise above your feelings and your emotions and love in action in spite of how you feel and what you're thinking. That is a very difficult thing to do. And then in the moment, determining the proper action, like what to do, how to love in that moment in spite of how you feel and what's going on internally, that's a hard thing to do. And furthermore, doing all this knowing that there is a good chance that people will probably judge you for how you've loved. That's hard. And we have to be able to rise above it. But unconditional love isn't all that attractive, at least giving it to others, to us at times, right? Because it's painful and it's often not reciprocated, and we know that. We know that. Jesus knew it too, and it is something that is learned, and we have a great example. We learn it from God. God's love is unconditional. I realize there's debates about that, but his love is unconditional. Romans 5:8, God showed his love for us in that while we were sinners. That's unconditional. Christ died for us. God showed us his love even when we didn't love him, when we could care less about him, when he wasn't necessarily even on our radar. He loved. He demonstrated that love, not based on anything that we did for him. In fact, we did everything opposite, speaking of mankind. While we were in that state, thinking that way, seeing that way, doing those things, he loves. He loves. God's love is not based on us. It's unconditional. John 3:16, God loved this world in this way. This world in this way. This world, which is broken, as we say it, is corrupt, is yearning and longing for the day when all things will be restored and healed, as Paul says in his letter to Romans. This world, he loved it so much. He loved it literally in this way, that he gave his son. That's unconditional. That's unconditional. He illustrated for us what true love is. Unconditional, so that we could love like him. Matthew 5:43 through 48. Read these words with me very, very, very slowly and consider this. It is unconditional love. Unconditional love that drives us to love your enemies. Love your enemies. Not based on their love. Not based on anything that's going to be reciprocated. Not based on anything that you're going to get out of that necessarily. Love your enemies. And it takes unconditional love to do that. And to pray for those who persecute you so that you may be, underline this, do this so that you may be children, sons and daughters of your Father who is in heaven, unconditionally loving as he does. For he makes, he goes on to say, for he makes, here's the illustration. If you have a hard time grasping this, here it is. For he does this. He makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good. And he sends rain on the just and on the unjust. His love is not contingent upon the unjust being just. He wants the unjust to be just, which is why he loves unconditionally. And when we see that, as John says later, we love because he loved. Jesus goes on to say, for if you love those who love you, here's conditional love. You love those who love you. That's conditional love. Then he says, what reward do you have? Don't even the tax collectors do the same? So he's calling us to do something beyond what I'd say we're programmed. And if you greet only your brothers, that's conditional. What more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? When he says Gentiles here, he's essentially referring to anyone who is not a Jew or considered a child of God. He goes on to say, you therefore must be, I like this word, perfect. This morning in class I said I like the word evil. Now I like the word perfect. Perfect. And if you don't know why I said I like the word evil, you should have been here in class. You therefore must be perfect, as your heavenly Father is perfect. The word perfect here typically we say it means complete, but I feel like we don't quite understand what we mean by the term complete there. Because the word here literally has to do with the end, E-N-D, goal, the limit. You've reached the standard. In other words, the goal is set before us. The standard of the Father is here, the standard of love, which is why he says you therefore must be perfect. Reach the standard, the goal, as your Father. And that love is unconditional. In fact, I would challenge you to go to 1 Corinthians 13 and read about love being personified and look at that from the perspective of unconditional love. We might look at 1 Corinthians 13 and think those things are very, very difficult to do. Part of the reason is our love is oftentimes programmed to be conditional. It's a challenge. And it's a hard thing, but it's a challenge that must be met. And finally, I'll tell you this. It is unconditional love that saves us. Unconditional love. Ephesians 2, 4, and 5. But because of his great love for us, God, who is rich in mercy, made us alive with Christ, even when we were dead in transgressions. It is by grace you were saved. Did you see it? But because of his great love for us, God made us alive when we were dead in sin. That's unconditional love. For by grace you are saved. We think we understand grace, but grace is not separate from love. Grace is a demonstration, an illustration of love. It's God's working in your life. And that working is not just simply based on the fact that you are just. He worked in us way before we even acknowledged him. That's unconditional love. It's unconditional love. It's a hard thing. But it's unconditional love that we have received, and it's unconditional love that we are to give. 1 John 4:19. We love because he first loved us. Unconditional love. Now, I understand that every situation is different and demands various things of us. Right? How we respond and react and what's needed is going to look different, and it's going to change from situation to situation. And as a result, it puts us in a position where we're vulnerable to people judging us based on how we've loved in that moment. We have to be okay with that. We have to be okay with that. But every situation demands something different of us. And in those situations, though, we have to ask ourselves, am I loving the very best that I can? That's a real thing. Am I loving the very best that I can in this moment? Do I truly desire the best for them, regardless of what they're saying or doing to me? Regardless of the decisions or the choices they're making. Do I truly desire the best for them? Is my response to them based on a conditional love because they've done what I wanted them to do? Or am I able to love when they do not do what I like? Hear me out here. It's not that our desires are what we want for people to do. It's not that those things aren't valid. It doesn't mean that the pain isn't real. But our response needs to rise above that. What do you do when your children, brothers, sisters, loved one makes decisions that you know aren't good and healthy and are destructive for them? They're not decisions that you would make. They're not decisions you want them to make. But when they do that, how do you respond? Sure, the feelings are there, right? The pain is there. The hurt is definitely there. You feel for them. You feel heavy for them, right? It's a burden. It's there. And you just wish that they would have made a better choice and a better decision. How do you respond in those moments? Do they know that you're for them or against them? Do they know that even though they've royally messed up, and even though you don't agree with what they're doing, and it doesn't mean you have to, do they know that you'll be there by their side? Or are they willing to take correction from you? And part of that is going to be based on how we love. Do we love based on merit, based on the right conditions, the right feelings, the right circumstances? That's easy love. Or do we rise above these and love unconditionally? Do the broken people in your life gravitate towards you? Do they sense that you're for them or against them? Do the broken people in your life sense that you're for them? Do they gravitate towards you, knowing that you're for them and that you'll help them? That's a question that we need to ask and we need to answer. And that's the one that we're going to explore over the next couple of weeks. How do we love like Jesus? People gravitated towards him, knowing the kind of lives they were living and the sin. But they gravitated towards him because they knew that he was for them. How do we do that? Can we do that? And when I say can we do that, are you willing to do that? Unconditional love. Our Father, we're thankful for this day that we can come and we can explore and continue to explore what it looks like to love like you, with all its challenges and its complications, with the hurts and the pains that go along with it, with the judgments, with our feelings and our own emotions and standards that have been set. As complicated as it might be, Father, I pray that we will learn to lean into you and trust you to guide us, to knowing what to say and what to do and how to respond, so that we too might love as you love, so that in that love, that light will shine, and that those in darkness will truly have seen the light, knowing that there is a healing hand, corrective, maybe even assertive, but loving. I pray, Father, that you'll teach us how to do this, how to be this way. It's in Jesus I pray. Amen.